My family's coming home on Friday afternoon for a long Easter weekend, and I've decided to kick off our celebration by making my Provencal French-style seafood stew. And I'm going to show you how to make this easy and elegant recipe today. So let's get started. So to start to make our broth, I've got to crush the tomatoes, and I really like to use a good brand of whole tomatoes. And I'm just going to add, this is my second can, and I'm going to add these to my bowl. Now, I'm going to show you how to crush tomatoes so you don't get them all over your kitchen. You're going to be inclined to pick it up and squish it like this, but if I do, this tomato juice is going to squirt. So what you want to do is you want to get your hand down in the bowl, and you just want to squish your tomatoes into bite-sized pieces. I've washed my hands, and I'm going to set my crushed tomatoes aside. And if you've decided that you want to use lobster tail in your seafood stew, I'm going to show you an easy way to remove it from the shell. First of all, I use kitchen shears, and I like to cut through the belly meat on both sides. Just pull this completely loose, and starting at the opposite end of the lobster, just give it a quick tug and a quick pull. You've removed it from the shell, and don't throw these shells away. All I'm going to do is I am quickly going to chop my lobster into bite-sized pieces, and I'm using 2 lobster tails in my stew today. When I make my seafood stew, I like to jazz it up a little bit and serve it with my recipe for lemon rice. And the only prep work you have to do to make lemon rice is to zest a lemon. For that, you're going to need, or hopefully you have, a microplane grater. And a nice little trick is if you hold the microplane grater upside down and zest your lemon, all of your zest stays in one place. So we've got the zest of one entire lemon on our plate. I'm going to cut this lemon in half, and we're ready to start our rice. The first thing we're going to do is make our broth. And I'm just going to start by putting about 6 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil in the bottom of an 8-quart stock pot. I'm going to add about 3 cups of yellow or sweet onion, about 2 cups of chopped celery, and I'm going to crank up the heat, and I'm going to saute these for about 5 or 6 minutes, just until the vegetables are tender. Well, my vegetables are all nice and soft right now, but still a little crunchy. I'm going to add 2 cups of chicken stock to this, but if you're serving vegetarians, just go right ahead and use vegetable stock. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an entire bottle of a nice semi-sweet wine. I'm going to bring this to a rapid simmer, and I'm going to let it cook for about 10 minutes, just to kind of simmer off the alcohol. And the next thing I'm going to do is just add all of those crushed tomatoes. That's 2 28-ounce cans. And I'm going to add my spices, which are traditional French, some bay leaves, some red pepper flakes, some sea salt, and a little bit of thyme. Everything's been added to my broth except for one thing. I'm going to add those lobster shells that we talked about. This is really going to give it a whole lot of extra flavor to the stew. I'm just going to cover this pot, move it to the back burner, turn it on low, get it to a nice gentle simmer for about 30 minutes. And while that's going on, we're going to prepare our rice. To make our lemon rice, I put 6 cups of water in a 4-quart stock pot with 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to use the longest grain of white rice possible, and the trick is sprinkle it, don't dump it, into the pot. Give it a brief stir. Adjust to a simmer, cover, and cook for 15 to 18 minutes without uncovering or stirring. While my rice is cooked, I'm just going to turn this off and lift the lid. Now, to turn this into my recipe for lemon rice, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter, a teaspoon of cracked black pepper, the juice of that lemon that we zested, and all of the zest. I'm just going to stir this together. Oh, I can smell this. It is absolutely wonderful. All that lemon juice and lemon zest. I'm going to cover it. And I'm going to set this aside to let it finish steaming while we add the seafood. Well, my broth is finished. I've taken the lid off and I've removed those lobster shells. Oh, does this smell heavenly. The first thing I'm going to add is my shrimp. All of them. That's 2 pounds of large shrimp. The next thing I'm going to add are my scallops, and that's 2 pounds of bay scallops. And I'm going to let this simmer for about 1 to 2 minutes. Now, you'll know pretty much when it's time to add the lobster because the soup's broth is going to come back to a simmer, not a rapid boil, but once you see it simmering again, it's time to add the lobster tail, which is a more delicate meat and it's going to cook for a shorter period of time. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the shrimp and the scallops. I'm going to stir the lobster in, and we're going to let this cook for a minute or two. Okay, it's back to a simmer again. I'm just going to add that entire pound of crab meat. I'm going to stir this back into the stew, and I'm just going to let this simmer for about 1 or 2 minutes. Everything's cooked. I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of Pernod. It's a French aperitif, and it's got just a little hint of licorice flavor to it. And I'm just going to stir this in. Well, my stew is finished and my rice is perfect. And as soon as my guests arrive, the first thing I'm going to do after I kiss them all, I'm going to put a big scoop of rice into the center of each one of their bowls, and then I'm going to spoon some of this luscious seafood and garnish it with some chives that I picked out of my garden this morning. For this and all of my recipes, just go to my website.